Greetings. I am a representative of the anti-Semite movement. These videos are AI assisted, are not edited, and are read from script. Today's subject is the warning. This is a warning to all who reject God's divine order of righteousness. The indescribable conditions awaiting the rejectors is framed in the unfathomable description as hellfire. The warning mentioned emphasizes the consequences of rejecting God's divine order of righteousness. In many religious traditions, hellfire is a symbolic representation of the suffering and torment that awaits those who deliberately turn away from God's commandments and refuse to live righteously. In this context, hellfire is not just physical punishment, but a reflection of the negative, sinful agony one experiences from being separated from God's grace and mercy, either by choice or technology, being deceived. Rejecting God's divine order. God's divine order is the foundation of a positive sin-free life, consisting of God's guiding commandments and laws that guide individuals toward a sin-free, righteous existence. To reject this order is to reject God's will and design for humanity's behavioral science. According to the anti-Semite belief, this rejection has dire consequences because it signifies a conscious refusal to align with the principles and practices that lead to positive sin-free fulfillment. This is the positive process of the eternal flow of existence as God's behavioral science connected to the entire universal order of creation. God's behavioral science is connected to the entire universal order of creation, in which negative energy is destroyed and positive energy passes on, reborn, to carry on, only changing form within the righteous order of God. Rejectors, in this sense, are those who deliberately choose to live in sin, forsaking the divine laws and ignoring the call to righteousness. By doing so, people cut themselves off from the life-giving connection with God. This separation from God, which is the source of all light and truth, leads to negative, sinful mental blindness and physical suffering, as scriptures advise that the wages of sin is death. This symbolism of hellfire. The so-called term hellfire is used as a metaphor for the increasing unimaginable pain and torment that result from rejecting God. This so-called hellfire is not just a physical condition of suffering, but a negative mental condition as well during our existence here on earth. Not a fictitious environment or place found under the ground after we pass away. The fire represents the consuming nature of sin and the self-inflicted torment that comes with being apart or separated from God. Hellfire is the term used as the eternal negative consequence of choosing sin over righteousness, where the person is left in a state of perpetual stress, worry, regret, anguish, guilt, grief, despair, mental and physical blindness, as said, leading a sinful life of slavery, suffering, which abruptly or gradually leads to mental and physical death. For example, a person abruptly overdosing from fentanyl, or a person gradually dying from smoking, afflicted with cancer, who has refused to suffer, to submit, who has refused to submit to God's laws which prohibit the use of dope and smoking. We are directed to keep our bodies free from these substances, kept clean as God's temple and God's unpolluted dwelling. In rejecting God's commandments, in embracing sin, an individual essentially condemns oneself to this fate. Hellfire represents the negative, destructive nature of a life lived outside of God's divine order, where the mind and consequent bodily afflictions, in denial of our true purpose of living sin-free, endures the painful consequences of our denial. For example, the newly arising disease called monkeypox, which afflict persons with large festering bumps from mainly sexual contact, as reported through heterosexual and homosexuality behavior. God's commandments guide us to refrain from committing indecent acts on another, sodomy. God's commandment states fornication and adultery is forbidden. And during our purification process of sin-free living, we are to diminish and eradicate lust. The suffering associated with hellfire is described as being indescribable and unfathomable because it goes beyond what human words can convey, as our minds cannot fathom the depth of suffering or just the pain of sinful retribution or affliction caused by transgression against God's command. This pain and suffering can only be felt, witnessed, and described by the afflicted person. It is not merely physical torment, but the profound negative, sinful emptiness that comes from being painfully severed from God's lawful presence. Since God is the source of all goodness, truth, and light, the absence of God's presence results in complete sinful desolation and blindness of mind. This state of suffering is not imposed by God as an arbitrary punishment, but is the natural consequences of a mindset choosing to reject God's divine order. In other words, it is a self-imposed condition resulting from our individual negative decisions and sinful behavior. Hellfire is not a particular place. It is a condition of life, just as heaven is a condition of life and not a particular place as well. It is not a particular place in the sky. The explanation pertaining to these two conditions of existence are taught by God, as we have been taught that the wages of sin are death, which causes a condition of decay, deterioration, decomposition, and breakdown. Not only physical death, but emotional, financial, mental, and break down within our relationships. This sinful condition of death also represents the sinful condition of hellfire as being a warning of pending negative consequences triggered by sinful behavior. The consequences of sinful rejection. Hellfire serves as a stern warning to those who reject the opportunity to live sin-free. As offered through God's commandments, the opportunity to living sin-free as offered through God's commandments. It is the ultimate outcome of failing to recognize and submit to God's authority. Our failure to recognize and submit to God's authority. Anti-Sinites understand that living in righteousness not only aligns us with God's will, but also secures our place in being present within the eternal, positive energy of sin-free fulfillment. Rejecting this path, on the other hand, leads to the opposite, a life and afterlife void of divine positive presence and lacking purpose in God's divine order of creation. This warning serves as a call to action. It emphasizes the urgency of our aligning ourselves with God's commandments, practicing righteousness, and living a life free from sin. The consequences of rejecting this path are severe, and the torment of hellfire is a reminder that sinful choices have lasting, eternal implications and negative effects. In conclusion, the condition of hellfire represents the ultimate state of negative, sinful suffering for those who reject God's divine order of righteousness. It symbolizes the torment and separation from God that comes with choosing a sinful path, offering a powerful warning to all who turn away from God's commandments. The indescribable suffering associated with this rejection of God serves as a reminder, a great powerful reminder of the seriousness of rejection in comparison to the blessing of living a sin-free, obedient life in accordance with God's will and guiding presence. Peace.